Hello, everyone. Welcome to the program again. This is Kevin Shipp coming to you from the Ascent Studio, located somewhere deep in the southern United States. I want to talk this morning about a question that is asked all the time. If these things, these unconstitutional and illegal things are going on within our government, why are very few, if any, people coming out and blowing the whistle on it or talking about it? And that's a very good question. It's a question that everyone wants to know the answer to. Well, the purpose of this program today is to explain why whistleblowers don't come forward, and to get into detail into the systematic procedures that have been around for 60 years that the shadow government deep state has to silence and, if necessary, destroy a whistleblower, and not just that, his or her family. So let's bring up some slides here. I want you all to see, as I'm talking, the important points here regarding whistleblowers and how they're treated, and many times destroyed by the shadow government, the secret parts of our government, the kind of outside the Constitution system, the secrecy, and the deep state, the swamp, which we all are all too familiar with. And I think I'm going to get a bumper sticker that says, I was talking about the deep state when talking about the deep state wasn't cool. I started talking about this in 2012 when I published From the Company of Shadows. It was a very, very lonely time. Nobody would touch it. And now that I guess for them the risk is lower, excuse me, everyone is coming out. Even conservative talk show hosts are coming out and talking about the deep state. And we've seen the soft coup against the sitting president, where the swamp, the deep state, the shadow government has come out into full view for everyone to see once it realized that the election of Donald Trump was a threat to its system. So we're going to talk about this. Why is no one speaking out against the shadow government specifically, which is the most powerful system of secrecy? That would be the CIA, the NSA, and the FBI. CIA and NSA primarily. If these things are happening and have been happening for 60 years or more, why has no one come out? Well, I want to talk about that, and I want to address that today as we talk. A quick summary, if you go back and look at my previous video on the shadow government and the deep state, it is my view, excuse me, we got pollen around here. It is my view, coming from the inside, the belly of the beast, so to speak, that the shadow government and the deep state are not one and the same. They're two separate entities, although they are joined together with a matrix of secrecy agreements, and other things. The billions of dollars that the shadow government, CIA, NSA, spend giving to the deep state contractors binds them not just through the power of secrecy, but also through the power of money. So the shadow government, CIA, NSA especially, and the FBI now, we see, use the unbridled power of secrecy. That is their power. That is their weapon. It functions outside the Constitution. It controls Congress. It controls the judiciary, and it controls the White House and the election, re-election of presidents, as we're seeing bold-faced right out in full view now. Now, the deep state is the system. You can see the dollar sign I put there. The deep state is the system behind our government. That system is run by money, power, greed, and it's advanced through contracts, huge government contracts. The average CEO of a military-industrial complex, and Eisenhower called it the military-industrial congressional complex, because Congress and lobbyists are so tied into the MIC that the Congress is a part of that. And we'll deal with Congress later, because that's extremely important. They used to be the representatives of the people. That has changed, and corruption runs deep. We'll do a separate program on that. So the shadow government, NSA, CIA, FBI primarily, those are the three that are abusing the power of secrecy in the shadow government the most. And then the deep state system behind government is the military industrial congressional complex, and what I have termed the secret intelligence industrial complex, multi-billions worth of dollars that the CIA and the NSA give to private corporations to engage in secret programs. For example, Lockheed Martin is essentially a private CIA and is the major spying arm for the CIA and, matter of fact, the IRS. So we can see how massive and unconstitutional and many times illegal this system is. And I hope as I'm covering this, you understand how powerful this system is against one little man or woman who has the audacity to blow the whistle and stand up against it. You can see the power behind the machine that will destroy that person. So here's what Chuck Schumer said. Chuck Schumer, he is the shadow government deep state center, without a doubt. He has bold-faced lied to the American people, especially during the Kavanaugh hearing, and with no feelings of conscience or thoughts of conscience at all about what he was doing. This man is maybe one level above a serpent, in my opinion, because he's supposed to be representing the people, and he's not. He's representing the deep state and, of course, what I call the dark left. We've got another show on that also. So this is what Chuck Schumer said on the Maddow show. He said this: if you cross the intelligence community, they, the CIA and NSA primarily, have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. Now just think about that for a moment. If you cross the intelligence community, the shadow government, they'll get you. That's what he's saying. He said that before the deep state shadow government attacks on Trump began with an intensity we've never seen before in history. We haven't seen this kind of battle between a duly elected president, Donald Trump, and the shadow government deep state since John F. Kennedy and his arch enemy, Allen Dulles, who he fired, the biggest embarrassment in the powerful Allen Dulles' life. Dulles became Kennedy's arch enemy, and the two clashed, well, we kind of see where that went. Okay, so the shadow government has a literal, and this actually increased during the Obama administration and the embarrassing administration and its appointees, Director of the CIA, George Tenet, George Tenet's chief of staff, John Brennan. John Brennan later to become, through his favors to the shadow government, the director of the CIA. Knowing his background, and we've done a show on that, knowing his background and having been an internal CIA investigator and polygraph examiner, if Barack Obama had not appointed John Brennan for the favors that he'd done him, and the shadow government had not put so much power behind him, Brennan never would have passed his polygraph test. Brennan never would have even, it's amazing he even got in the CIA. Former FBI agent John Guandolo has come out and alleged that he was there personally and witnessed John Brennan convert to Islam a little more than 20 years ago when he was chief of station in Saudi Arabia. As a CIA officer, I thought it was supposed to be the other way around. I thought you were supposed to recruit them. Anyway, Brennan was a member of the Communist Party, and on and on and on and on it goes. So he has been seedy from the beginning. So Brennan was part of the Obama administration's war on whistleblowers and the increase in domestic surveillance. We found out recently through several Freedom of Information Act requests that the CIA has been spying on whistleblowers. Now, as a whistleblower, I prefer to call myself a trumpet blower instead. I don't know. I don't like the term whistleblower personally, although it applies to a lot of very heroic people. But these FOIs and this lawsuits revealed that the CIA, and this is important, the CIA upper echelon, this is not the good CIA employees at the lower levels than the 7th floor. It is full of good patriotic Americans. It's also full of a raft of liberal persons, many of whom I worked with and worked for. So the CIA employee population is quite liberal. But most CIA employees, the majority, perhaps with the exception of the director of operations, are just doing their job. Many of them are doing it for their country. And they're just providing for their families and their retirement and their health insurance and everything else. And they're good people. I work with some very good people. I still have some friends in there, and they're good people. So I'm talking about the CIA upper echelon. When I get into some of the tactics, specifically that the CIA uses to destroy whistleblowers, you'll see that those tactics come down from the top. But what this expose revealed is that the upper management of the CIA was secretly developing, or had secretly developed, a policy with statements and legal rationales to justify this routine, widespread surveillance of U.S. citizens, none of whom were suspected of terrorism or of being a spy. The CIA was collecting and is collecting emails between congressional staff and the CIA's head of the whistleblowing source protection. So any emails that employees had sent to the whistleblower protection officer in charge, Mr. McCullough, were being intercepted by the CIA, specifically John Brennan, and of course, George Tenet. These declassified documents came out in 2014 upon the order of Senator Grassley and the Judiciary Committee, revealed that the CIA was intercepting these emails and the most sensitive type of emails written to Congress involving whistleblowers that were reporting illegal or wrongdoing on the part of the intelligence community, specifically the CIA, who uses this in beyond an outrageous fashion. I will prove that today as we talk. I will show you exactly how the CIA does it. Excuse me, because I want you all to see the procedures that are going on in secret as I expose them. So if there are any whistleblowers out there that see criminal or unconstitutional activity, I want to encourage you, and I want you to know ahead of time how they're going to try to do it. And if you know how they're going to do it ahead of time, then by the grace of God, as I was, you'll be 2 steps ahead of them every time. These things have got to be exposed. This is a constitutional government, or at least it was. And this second government that's functioning, the shadow government outside the Constitution, the CIA, the NSA especially, and I'm focusing on the CIA because it's the most egregious. Second to that would be the NSA, and now we see the FBI. So you can see how bad this is. This is spying on U.S. citizens, not just U.S. citizens, but patriotic U.S. citizens that believe in the Constitution and are reporting violations of that, remembering that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Any federal agency or agency employee manager that violates the Constitution is committing a felony or multiple felonies. And that's what's happened in the case of the CIA, specifically John Brennan, who I think eventually is going to be facing an indictment. So we can see that this was both John Brennan and Director of National Intelligence James Clapper. Will James Clapper be indicted? You remember that James Clapper lied under oath about the NSA's domestic surveillance program, said that they weren't doing it. He was never charged with perjury. He was never held accountable for that. So even though Clapper was involved with Brennan on collecting these emails, he has got such a system of widespread protection behind him that I don't think he's ever going to be indicted. And it's worth noting that Mr. Clapper actually worked as an employee, contract employee for British intelligence, MI6, a foreign intelligence service. James Clapper was an employee before he came over, before he got his new position as the DNI. He worked for several private contractors. He also worked for private contractors with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. He was on the board of those contractors, and he was also the director of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. So you can see how deep this stuff runs. Now here we go. I've talked about this time and time again. Clapper and Brennan refused to release the documents to the Judiciary Committee. This is their boss, the Judiciary Committee, claiming, as they always do, that they couldn't release them because the documents were classified. Or they had sources and methods, although they never say what those sources and methods are because many times they don't exist, or the documents fall under the Intelligence Identities Protection Act, a crafty act, which allows the CIA to refuse to provide documents because some of the people in those documents were undercover. And they use that as a huge tool to withhold documents from Congress, not to mention the American people. My mission is to bring the American people back into their position of running the government, not the other way around. And it starts with education. It starts with alerting people. It starts with motivating people. And then it starts with, continues with unifying people around the Constitution. And I'm seeing that happen. There's millions of people out there now and growing that have joined this patriotic movement to take the Constitution back. I get a lot of emails. It's very encouraging. So the CIA's breach of whistleblower confidentiality, which is life-threatening in many cases, the study showed has a quote-unquote chilling effect on intelligence community whistleblowing. I'd go beyond a chilling effect. I'd say it stops whistleblowing in the intelligence community. So it goes beyond that. So as I go through this, you have to ask yourself, and I'll show you the system of targeting that they use. If the shadow government, this system, CIA, NSA specifically, are so powerful, who is going to sacrifice their salary and their pension, their health insurance, their own family's finances, their wife and their children's well-being? And they will go after their wife and their children financially to destroy them. And I'll show that happen. In my case, they went after my family, and that was their biggest mistake. You can mess with a man, but you don't mess with his family. So, but who's going to be willing to sacrifice this? Their reputation will be destroyed. They will be blackballed from any employment using their credentials and experience. They'll be blackballed from any employment outside the CIA. These calls will be made, and so they will have difficulty even finding other employment, especially with any contractor even closely connected to the CIA, the NSA, or the FBI. Now, in my case, many of you know my case, you can go to fortheloveoffreedom.net, and I have released all of the documents that the CIA tried to conceal and threatened me with prison if I did. You can see all those documents showing exactly how they did it with the actual documentation. But in my case, I sent a very detailed memorandum to all the members of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, advising them of the illegal criminal activity that I had evidence of that the CIA had committed. We notified the FBI about this illegal activity, and the FBI called us back and said now they had basically been advised not to take the case. What a coincidence. Of course, now we know why that is. The FBI and the CIA and the Department of Justice legal system are joined completely with the shadow government, the CIA. But here's the memo. You can go on to fortheloveoffreedom.net. You can see the full text of this memo that I sent to the intelligence committees. John Brennan, as we have just noted, was surveilling my contact. We were under surveillance. Our family was followed, houses broken into. But there were also, and I knew this when I was in there, I gave them some time before I resigned to come out and fight them to scramble and do whatever they could, spying on my computers, tapping my phones, following me around CIA headquarters and outer buildings. I knew all that was going on. And, you know, it was kind of sad and almost heartbreaking because I joined the CIA out of patriotism because I loved my country and I wanted to do something for my country. And I was to find out, the higher I got up in the CIA, that the CIA is not doing this for our country at all. It's doing it for itself and its money and the millions that it has, and the secret, dark operations that it has ongoing that no one knows about, especially Congress and the American people have no idea. Is there something constitutionally wrong with that picture? You're darn right there is. So you can go on fortheloveoffreedom.net and you can see this actual memo. The intelligence communities, Dianne Feinstein, Nancy Pelosi, I sent it to both of them, never answered my correspondence. Never heard a peep from them. And I think now, I think people understand that that is not surprising. So I talk about the tyranny of secrecy, I call it. because the CIA specifically and the NSA also are using secrecy to conceal illegal activity, even from Congress, from the president, and of course, from the American people. You remember John F. Kennedy, who said this in a tremendous speech. He knew this, as did Eisenhower, way back then. As we know, a famous quote, Kennedy said, "The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society." Not only is it repugnant in my view, it creates a government aside from our government that is run by the unbridled power of secrecy and works with impunity in some very dark things. He went on to say this, and I'd encourage anybody that can to listen to this speech because it's inspiring. He said this: "There's a very grave danger that an announced need for increased security," we see now, quote unquote, national security, which the CIA uses. It's not our definition of national security, it's their definition of national security, and that is self-preservation and the concealment of the operations, illegal operations they're involved in. Increased security, he goes on, will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. Written all the way back there in the 1960s. Kennedy had seen this beyond even what Harry Truman had commented. Harry Truman signed off on the creation of the CIA from the Office of Strategic Services. CIA came into being, and a matter of 4 years later, Truman came out, wrote an op-ed stating that the CIA was casting a shadow on our position of freedom, hence the title of my book, From the Company of Shadows. And Harry Truman also called it a sinister and mysterious agency. Then we get up to JFK, who saw the same thing in depth, including the CIA's connections to the mafia and their assassination program. And he said this, which may have, there were several things that put the target on JFK. The Bay of Pigs was a primary impetus on that, and his announcement that he was going to withdraw the troops from Vietnam. Vietnam was a false flag a war. I'll talk about how the CIA set that up. The Gulf of Tonkin was a false, faked incident. So JFK was going to pull all U.S. troops out of Vietnam. That represented $1 trillion to the military-industrial complex and the CIA. He said, "I'll splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it into the winds." And we can see how that went. His arch nemesis, as I mentioned, CIA director, one of the darkest government officials in our history, Kennedy fired him over the Bay of Pigs incident. And we do a full show on Allen Dulles. And Dulles began secretly meeting with senior CIA, retired or resigned CIA officials in an attempt to counter John F. Kennedy's administration. So this is how the shadow government does it. If you want to conceal it, you classify it. When you've got this unbridled power of secrecy, it's pretty easy. Let me give you some examples. The torture report that the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence was preparing. You remember that John Brennan and the CIA penetrated and hacked in to the Senate computers on Capitol Hill to spy on the torture report. You remember that? That is a felony. Was John Brennan ever indicted? No. Was anybody in the CIA that did it indicted? No. No, he just apologized and it went away. Shadow government protects its own. So the first torture report came out originally from the CIA before the Senate Select Committee took it over. Congress demanded what the CIA's torture program was all about. Of course, the CIA refuses, says it's classified. It's a game. This game's been going on for 60 years. Congress demands the documents. The CIA refuses and stalls for 6 months, a year, 4 years, and finally says, upon threats, which they laugh at, okay, all right, we'll comply. We'll give you the documents. And here's the CIA's release of the torture report. Can you read what the torture report is all about? No, because they classified it. Remember, a source or a method, or Intelligence Identities Protection Act, or a host of other reasons why they have the power to black these things out over Congress. How about this? Remember the NSA domestic surveillance program? Congress, once again, the toothless tiger, demands that the NSA turn over everything it has on domestic surveillance of US citizens. You remember, they were collecting 1.5 billion pieces of information a day on us, all of us. So after dragging the feet in the usual time-tested process, this is what the NSA provides to Congress. It's classified, they say. Now, another one. Remember Fast and Furious, running guns across, or selling guns to drug cartels across the border, some of which were used to assassinate Mexicans, killed a Border Patrol agent. This was under Eric Holder, one of the dirtiest attorney generals we've ever had. He refused to provide anything to his bosses, the oversight committees. Typical, it's a game, it's a sham. So the usual process, no, we can't show you that. Eric Holder and the FBI say it's classified, sources and methods. We can't release that. And then the intelligence committees come back and say, well, you better, because you're violating Congress's oversight, blah, 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 blah. And so finally, Eric Holder and the department just says, okay, we'll release a document, and here it is. Can you see the process here? I want everyone to understand the exact process that they're using. Another example, how about this one? The 9/11 Commission report, which was prepared for the American people, not inside the government. It was prepared for us. However, under the orders of George W. Bush, 28 pages of that report to the American people looked like this, completely blacked out. Now, when this report was written for the American people, what was George W. Bush, what did he want to conceal when he ordered that blacked out? Well, I think we know now, I think with good certainty, that involves Saudi Arabia's connection to the CIA, Saudi intelligence, Saudi Arabia's connection, including the bin Laden family, to the Bush family, 20 years of oil contracts with the bin Laden family. They were close to the bin Laden family, and George W. Bush wanted to conceal that from people. You know, I'm an independent. I'm not a Republican, and I'm not a Democrat. And frankly, the Republicans and the Democrats essentially are one and the same. I think the GOP has been just as guilty in covering up these things because it's about these parties, the Republican and Democratic parties, are all about power, and they're all about money, and they're all about self-protection. So you can see what they did to our 9/11 report. By this time, by now, in this presentation, people should be outraged. But ladies and gentlemen, it gets worse. In my case, you can go to fortheloveoffreedom.net and you can see where I've detailed everything they did. I came out and I blew the whistle on the CIA, filed a personal injury lawsuit. My family was deathly ill, exposed to a toxic substance in the base, on a secret base. I was ordered with my family to stay on the base as the executive officer there in charge, excuse me, in charge of the security for the entire base. So when I came out and blew the whistle all internally to the CIA, documents, evidence of my family's poisoning. My wife was bleeding from her gums, bleeding from her nose. She had bruises all over her body. She completely lost her short-term memory, had to be put on morphine for severe headaches, and was bedridden. The doctors, CAT scans and everything else could not figure out what was wrong with her. The only thing they didn't test for was exposure to biochemical weapons. You can go into my expose on that also on fortheloveoffreedom.net. So the evidence I collected, because by the grace of God, I was them. I was a manager in the CIA. So I was 2 steps ahead of them. I knew them. I knew who they were, what they were, and how they destroyed people. So my evidence was so strong, the federal district judge placed me and my family, my wife and children, under a gag order so that we couldn't talk to anybody about what they had done to us and what they were doing to us to try to gag me from coming out and saying these things. Well, I happen to love my country. I happen to firmly support our constitutional form of government, the most free system of government in the history of mankind. So I am not going to be bound by a secret government that engages in criminal activity. Now this, for 2 years, as my attorney, who is a hero, and I hope someday his identity will be known. I'm protecting him right now from public scrutiny. He's a man of courage, one of my dearest friends, an absolute hero. But my attorney and I demanded that we see the gag order to see what our family was gagged by. The CIA's response was the old modus operandi. Well, we can't show you the gag order because it's too sensitive. Too sensitive. Okay, so we don't even know what we're gagged by. See, can you see the game here? They did that for 2 years until we pressed them, and I think they were starting to get even more concerned that I was going to go public. So they said, okay, here's a copy of the gag order. We'll give it to you. And this is the gag order. Do you see a pattern here? I read this. I still didn't know what I was gagged by. This is entrapment. They were gagging me and my family, but not telling us what we were gagged by. So if we said anything that violated whatever is in this order, specifically, they could come and get me. That was the last straw. No, you're not going to get away with that. All right. Then what they did, and I'll get into this in detail, this is used with impunity by the CIA. When I went forward with all of my evidence, they used the state's secret privilege to seal my case and then blocked Congress from having access to all of my evidence. This is a system that they use. This is one of the CIA's favorite systems to silence whistleblowers, completely making it illegal if they talk about their case and the evidence to anyone with the threat of prison. Here is the legal document that the CIA violated. Now, this is criminal activity, everyone. They violated this order multiple times. They classify all of the unclassified attorney memos. That's what they did in our case. They took my attorney's correspondence and sealed it and classified it so no one could see it. They classified all the doctor's diagnosis of my family's toxic exposure. They falsified environmental tests. They performed a false test, which I exposed in detail, point by point by point, in an internal grievance, which I realized later was just letting the system manipulate the whole thing. But they classified doctors, open source doctors' diagnosis of our family's toxic exposure, and my specifically wife and oldest son were very, very, very sick. And the false environmental test that they finally said they were going to come out and conduct, because I was about to blow the thing wide open. They came out and did a false test. You can see the actual document on fortheloveoffreedom.net that lays out each part of that document that they did that was falsified. So they sealed. I had a environmental test done by a private, well-known environmental expert who examined our residence and all of the toxins that were in there and advised that our family needed to be evacuated. The CIA sealed those public environmental test results. And coincidentally, I don't really believe there's coincidences, but several months after I filed my personal injury suit, this environmental expert was shot in the head, and in a case that was still unexplained by the detectives. That was published in the news media. I have the news media articles. I posted them on fortheloveoffreedom.net. He was shot in the head. Fortunately, he lived, but he is now blind. It was published by the local news, and then all the news reports have been erased from the internet. However, you can go to my site and you can see them because I copied them when they came out, and of course I stored them for later use. The CIA redacted all the information in Ship's My Book from the company of shadows. All these things I'm talking about, the environmental test results, the break-ins, the followings, testimony by the security guards that they've been ordered to follow us, removal of the documentation of the break into our house and destruction, and on and on and on and on it goes. I wrote about that in From the Company of Shadows, and the CIA allowed me to put things in there. I was quite surprised at some of the operations I was involved in, how the CIA recruits agents. They let me publish. However, anything dealing with my family's poisoning, and potentially what we were exposed to in From the Company of Shadows, was blacked out. None of it is classified. All of it, and I know that because I was a classifying authority. I know what's classified and what isn't. None of that was classified. All of it was open source. Doctors, diagnosis, environmental tests, and witness statements. The CIA blacked that all out of my book, which, based on this executive order, is illegal. The CIA doesn't care if it breaks the law. I think everyone should probably know that by now. They've been doing it for 60 plus years. Now, this was the really disheartening part. I went to the CIA Office of Inspector General, or the IG, with my case internally, gracefully and professionally documenting everything and requesting the IG do an investigation into what was happening. I was advised later on by a senior officer who was in the IG at the time that the IG was complicit in shutting my case down and sealing it, and of course threatening me and trying to silence me. That's why I don't have a whole lot of faith with internal IG groups, none of them, because when you are employed by and your career is with the agency that you're investigating, you think anything's really going to happen? No. So the CIA IG was actually involved in the cover-up of my case and the attempted destruction of me and also of my family. That was really disheartening, but as I began to see how corrupt and evil and criminal the CIA was, now, of course, it's no surprise. So where are they? Where are the whistleblowers? Why don't they come out? That question I talked about at the beginning of the show. It's important for people to understand. Everyone that works in this case for the CIA signs a CIA secrecy agreement, and that's fine because originally it was created to protect real, legitimate sources and methods, the real ones, and protect our agents in the field, like I was. It was the original creation was to do that, and originally it was created to protect sensitive military technology, satellites, and things like that. That secrecy agreement has now been weaponized by the CIA, so that if anybody, a CIA employee, an NSA employee, a government contractor, or a private corporation that has a classified contract with the CIA, if they see something illegal, criminal, or they want to blow the whistle on something that's a part of that program, the CIA can and will use the secrecy agreement, weaponizing it, and threaten the person with termination or criminal penalties, prison, if they violate that agreement for any reason. So much for whistleblowing. There is a massive, complex, multi-billion-dollar system of secrecy and concealment, some of which I have just shown you. CIA employees don't realize that when they are hired, because no one tells them intentionally, that they're waiving their constitutional rights to a trial. They essentially give up their day in court. If they ever have any lawsuit against the CIA, they have no right to bring that lawsuit to court or to trial. Now, most CIA employees don't know that. Hopefully they do now. There is a sequential, perfected, over 60 years system to silence any of this dissent totally. So Congress came out and passed the 2012 Whistleblower Protection Act. Some of you may remember that. It was supposed to protect whistleblowers within the government, always a sham, and Congress was right in there with this. If you read the Whistleblower Protection Act, it does not include employees who have any access to confidential or secret information. They are not covered by the 2012 Whistleblower Protection Act. So Barack Obama, under another guise, passes another bill. After the outrage, the 2014 Whistleblower Enhancement Protection Act. So now intelligence community employees can blow the whistle and be protected. Or can they? If you read this so-called Protection Act, it states that the employee must be in their position at the time that they blow the whistle. So they have to be sitting at their desk in the CIA when they blow the whistle while the CIA monitors them, and then they're protected, which means they are immediately subject to the system of destruction, sitting right there under the CIA's control, NSA's control, FBI's control. And you think they're going to blow the whistle there? No. Another sham. And Congress goes right along with these shams, everyone. We have to understand that the majority of Congress is bought and paid for. We'll talk about that, as I mentioned, in another program. So there's an internal system of personal destruction. The news media is compliant. The news media, how many deep investigations of the CIA have you seen lately in the mainstream media? None. The mainstream media receives talking points from the CIA and parrots those talking points. The news media is complicit. You remember Operation Mockingbird? What they don't tell you is Operation Mockingbird, the CIA controlling, manipulating the press, didn't end. All they said was they were going to stop paying journalists to do it. But the CIA has a quid pro quo with the media. You report what we want you to report, and we'll continue to give these quote unquote anonymous sources. Whenever you see an anonymous source in the Washington Post, for example, that's coming from the CIA. So if the Washington Post wants to keep having these anonymous sources, they better not publish anything that investigates what the CIA is doing. We did a program on Operation Mockingbird 2.0, we called it. You can find that on patreon.com/Kevin_ship. I've gone on Patreon to stop the trolls and at least put somewhat of a wall up against the attacks on me personally. And I mentioned the state secrets privilege. I'll talk about that a little bit later. They will, if the whistleblower has strong evidence and is going to win their case, this is what they did to me. The CIA will invoke the state secrets privilege, which allows them with impunity to seal the case so that none of the evidence that the employee has can ever be revealed. They can't even talk with their attorneys about it. In my case, my family, wife, and children could not talk to anybody about the devastation that they had gone through. If you violate the state secrets privilege, you are threatened with prison for 5 years as I blew the whistle. My wife and I waited for the black Suburbans to roll up, and I was fully prepared. Of course, I didn't pack. I didn't need anything if that happened to take with me. I was ready to go. I was fully prepared and ready to go to prison. It never happened because the CIA knows darn well what they did, that it was illegal, criminal, and the last thing they want is for that to become public. So let's look at their system of eliminating whistleblowers, the modus operandi, the MO. Only supervisors who comply, and I'm speaking about the CIA right now because that's what I saw personally. Only supervisors who comply with this system are appointed to high-level positions. I'll give you an example. I was appointed as a branch chief for a particular office. I had 2 employees working for me, both good men, both top performers. I was happy to have them both on board. But the chief of this particular branch tried to get them to do some things that they did not think were ethical, and they both said, no, we're not going to do that. We're trainers. We've been brought in here to do our job. So I was called in by the branch chief, who sat me down and said, we want you to rate down these 2 employees and teach them that they better comply or else. And if you don't rate them down, we're going to put a memo in your file against you and against your career and insubordination. Excuse me, so much shocked. I walked out, and my gosh, this is when I begin to see the narcissism and the evil of some of these people. I walked out and I thought about that, and I said, no, these are good men. They have performed well. I rated them accordingly on my performance appraisals, and I'm not changing it. I went in and I told them, I'm not changing it. The performance appraisal stands, at which point I was told there's going to be a memorandum going in your file. I said, make my day, whatever. Truth and justice are more important than power and evil. I saw so much of that in the organization I used to love that it was sickening. The supervisor will, as I just told you, they'll issue a veiled threat of retribution. You know, I know you have a concern about this, but you know, like this branch chief told me, took me and sat me down. He goes, you know, Kevin, people who go to the IG with a complaint, they always suffer for it, and they usually regret it. And I said, Frank, XYZ, what do you mean by that? And he says, oh, never mind, you're dismissed, you can go. I walked down. That was my first glimpse of the system I'm talking about. Then, if the employee continues to blow the whistle, and if they try to do it internally, which is 9.9 times out of 10 a mistake, they start becoming denied promotions. They hold off their promotions when they are fully qualified and the ratings are on their performance appraisals. They blocked my GS-14 on this secret site, and even my supervisor back in headquarters said, "You need to go to the IG. You're being targeted." He's a good man, and I really appreciated him saying that. So they denied my GS-14 promotion, and of course I knew then that the attacks were in full swing. They'll give the person an assignment away from their peers. Remember, they stuck me on the secret base where we were exposed, and then they'll try to embarrass them in front of their peers. So it looks like, well, this person made some kind of mistake, or it's pretty clear to everybody around that that person is being penalized, and no one is going to challenge that system, or they're next. So people out there in any government organization that have seen illegal activity and want to report it, I want you to know this ahead of time. So when you see these signs, these steps, this is a perfected system. When you see these steps, you'll know them ahead of time, and you'll know what to do to counter it. Typical shadow government MO. The reporting documents from the whistleblower are lost. When I came out and reported the vulnerability to assassination of our agents in the field through an internal computer problem, I was threatened. My documents were lost, and it was removed from the headquarters server. I have since documented that. My grievance that I filed internally about the events on this secret base was lost several times. And then eventually it was destroyed, never heard from again. And the CIA actually fabricated the grievance itself. I have now published that on fortheloveoffreedom.net to show everyone the grievance itself. There's nothing classified in it, and it exposes the CIA's false environmental test and some of the other things that they did. They lost it, claimed they didn't have it. When I pressed the Office of General Counsel, who was also complicit. So if someone's been a counsel, an attorney for the CIA, then they've been involved in dirty activity. In this case, the Office of General Counsel lost, quote unquote, my grievance. When I pressed them in a meeting with my two attorneys, I got a pretty much had enough. And my attorney said, "Now just calm down, Kevin," because I was about ready to go in there and get the thing myself. So I listened to their advice. So the OGC comes out, "Oh, well, we found your grievance. What a surprise." And it was a one-page document written in blue ink in someone else's handwriting. My grievance was 12 pages long of detailed written evidence. So both my attorneys sat there wide-eyed, couldn't believe what was happening, and they were to get even more shocked as we went on. So, classic MO, the documents, the reporting documents, well, they're lost, or they can't find them, and essentially they're destroyed. We've seen that in some pretty famous cases, same system. In the John F. Kennedy case, same system. In the Robert F. Kennedy case, same. And I'll talk about, I talk about the RFK assassination in another segment I'll be doing on YouTube probably later today. So here we go. So the employee files a grievance, as I did, and it turns out the Inspector General's office is complicit with the cover-up and the document destruction. So this is the MO that's used by the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, and it's been used in some famous cases, as I've said. Same system, same procedure, been around for 60 plus years. They use it because it works. Destruction of evidence. They will destroy evidence, as they did in the RFK assassination. The LAPD, who was trained by the CIA, and several of the unit members were working for the CIA as contractors, destroyed the evidence of the extra bullet holes during the RFK's assassination, which were not fired by Sirhan Sirhan. So notice, the first things they're going to do is destroy evidence. In my case, all of our personal belongings in the house had to be removed and destroyed. But what the CIA did was they stole 2 of those boxes, thinking that I wouldn't find them. When I came back to the house to take what I could out of there before they destroyed everything, I went up the hill to the house across the street. I think I had a weed eater in there I wanted to get. And I opened it up and walked in, and they had hidden 2 of my boxes of our personal effects in there for some reason. But they had stolen them and hidden them there. And you know, when people are corrupt and narcissistic, they tend to do stupid things. That's one of the things I learned about all of this. These people can be pretty stupid because they're so full of themselves, and it works against them. They falsify documents. They'll publish documents that are completely false and untrue. That was the case when they falsified my grievance. They do that in almost every case, if not every case. Documents lost, I talked about this. Witness intimidation. This is another typical MO that they use. Part of the process, they'll intimidate, of course, the whistleblower, as I've mentioned. They'll intimidate his or her coworkers from corresponding or talking with that person. Well, we have some concerns with John Doe, so you know, just wanted you to know that. And then the coworkers get paranoid, and the employee starts to lose some of their closest friends and coworkers as they begin to be sidelined. They intimidate the person's family if they have to. They'll go that far. They intimidate their attorneys and doctors. My attorneys were threatened with security violations if they didn't turn over all their information to be handled and stored within the CIA. Excuse me for a second here, folks. So as I mentioned, it's a procedure that has been used ad nauseum. Just got to turn my phone down here for a second. There we go. Okay. So as we proceed, our family, as I mentioned, was put under the state secrets privilege and threatened with prison. Our attorneys were threatened with security violations and with prison because of the state secrets privilege. We had a doctor who published a diagnosis who said our family needed to be evacuated from the house. And we were finally getting somewhere. And then we get a certified letter from that doctor once she found out who, it was pretty common knowledge for people around the base what that base was affiliated with. Apparently someone had contacted her. We got a certified letter saying that she would not see our family ever again. The environmental lady who had documented the toxic exposure in our house, her tongue swelled up and her throat swelled up, as it happened with us. She was writing a report, called me and said, you know, I love you guys so much. You're great. You were, you know, close to your family, but I won't be handling your case anymore. I've been given an offer I can't refuse by the company that the CIA used to perform the false environmental test. Good lady, but they got her with money, and she left our case and went out to work for the CIA's contract so-called environmental company. Destroying credibility. This is what they'll do. I saw this when I was an internal investigator. If anybody tries to cross them, they'll label them as their favorite word, disgruntled. Well, they're disgruntled, and they'll try to slip that into a file. Either during their, they'll slip it in their file in the Office of Medical Services and other places, and start putting little things in there. Now granted, I don't want to belittle the real cases of employees who just went bonkers, which are frankly very few. In the majority of cases, these are whistleblowers, and the system is being used against them. So, and of course they'll say, well, the person just has an axe to grind. That's why they're coming out and doing this. They're not doing this because they're a patriotic whistleblower. They're disgruntled and they have an axe to grind. So they'll start labeling the whistleblower like that. And you'll see through these cases, any that have managed to get out in public, you'll see the same process. Excuse me. Sorry, folks. This was their favorite. CIA came out and spread this statement. Well, Mr. Shipp lost his case against the CIA, and he's just disgruntled. And this is one of the reasons that I put all these documents out on my site. Number one, to prove who I was. And number two, to prove that I won the case against the CIA. The evidence was so strong, a federal district judge, and I have the memo on my site, ordered the CIA to a mediated settlement in Washington, D.C. because my evidence was so strong. The CIA, we all attended that mediated settlement ordered by the judge. The CIA settled with our family. We won. The CIA signed the settlement agreement. I have that now posted on fortheloveoffreedom.net. And so we had won, which is almost unheard of. A week later, the CIA contacted my attorney and said, if Mr. Shipp does not accept a lower settlement, which is just a fraction, we're going to seal his case using evidentiary privilege. In other words, the state secrets privilege. My attorney called me and I told him, call them back and tell them not only no, but H double toothpicks no. They signed the agreement. They need to abide by it. I think it was a matter of 3 days later, the CIA invoked the state secrets privilege and sealed all the evidence that I had collected and threatened my family with prison. Okay. So let's say the employee has the nerve to file a legal suit, and many employees have been hit with this and have run out of money, gone bankrupt, and been physically, emotionally devastated to the point where they just give up. But let's say an employee files a legal suit. The CIA blocks any outside attorneys that whistleblower has, and the CIA will only allow the person to use CIA-approved attorney, if you can believe it. Yep, they've been doing that for decades. The CIA demands all the evidence in the case from the whistleblower and his or her attorneys. All of the plaintiff case information, the CIA demands it. The CIA demands that it be held in CIA headquarters in a locked safe. So the CIA knows all of the evidence. And we're not talking about discovery here. We're talking about grabbing and controlling all of the plaintiff's information. And in most cases, the CIA will now claim that that information is classified and is subject to classification violation penalties. Same old procedure. So all of the documents are controlled by the CIA that the whistleblower or his or her attorney have collected in evidence. The CIA takes control of all of them. It classifies the information, as I've just shown in previous slides, and has total control over it. Now, in the majority of cases, the CIA will delay the case for years. I know cases 4 years, 8 years, 10 years that the CIA delayed the case, and they do this on purpose. The CIA had, in my case, they had about 8 attorneys that were on CIA salary no matter what they did. So they could sit back and collect their pay for the next 10 years and nothing to lose for them. So the CIA will drag the case out, and the idea is, and this has worked many times, is they will bleed the employee financially so that they can't, they're in deep, deep debt. I think John Kiriakou was in significant debt trying to defend himself against the CIA's attacks. And of course, he spent 2 years in prison. So they'll bleed the person dry, many times drive them into bankruptcy by dragging the case out. Attorneys' fees become so high. A lot of times the attorneys get burned out and they just don't want to represent the person anymore. And they'll just drop it because it is, I can tell you from experience, it is an incredibly painful and grueling process that goes on every single day, 24/7, 7 days a week, that kind of pressure. And of course, I went through it for 4 years, as did my family, and then another 10 years after that. You can imagine that kind of stress every single day. What kept me going, I'm a person of faith, number one. And number two, I love for this country, and I detest injustice and illegal activity on the part of any government. So they'll delay the case. And as I've mentioned a couple times, if they have to, if the whistleblower wins, they will hit it with the state secrets privilege and seal everything. Once the state secrets privilege is invoked, it blocks Congress, your congressman or senator, from having any access to your evidence or your case ever. And in their minds, the case is done, you're done. Most of the time, they won't even report your case. For example, my case, there will be no public record that they shut it down using the state secrets privilege, and no one will know about it, except some of the cases that manage to see the light of day. The vast majority never do. Okay, let's move on. Most people, as I mentioned, will stop right there. How can you continue when you're bankrupt? How can you continue when you've got the severe emotional and mental stress? How can you continue when your family's finances have been destroyed? Most people, they'll stop right there, or they'll just go into complete despair, alcoholism, in some cases suicide, which is the goal, frankly. So most will stop right there. If they have the nerve to continue, this is a favorite in the case, and I'll speak of the CIA because I witnessed this personally. I'm an eyewitness of all of this. They'll search the employee's travel accounting because everybody they know makes a mistake somewhere in their travel accounting or their use of a government credit card. They'll search throughout the case to try to find anything that they can use against that employee to hit them with a penalty and shut them up. In my case, when we were being evacuated, I was ordered into the chief of base's, quote unquote, office with my wife as a witness, who they refused to interview, of course. And he proceeded to order me and my wife to use the government credit card for our evacuation expenses back to Washington. This is when we were finally evacuated. And we asked, well, would you put that in writing? He said, no, I will not. Well, that's the biggest mistake we made. We should have stopped it right there until he put it in writing. So when all of our belongings had to be boxed up and were contaminated, they were going to be taken out and burned. My wife, bless her heart, had some priceless heirlooms from her grandmother that were in her family for decades and decades that were going to have to be burned, and we couldn't have that. So I had a company called ServPro, and there were some issues there. Let me tell you, there was some manipulation there. But anyway, we had a company called ServPro take my wife's heirlooms, a beautiful wood table. There was a hutch, chairs that went around this table, lots of silver from her grandmother, things like that. The company took this to hold in their warehouse for decontamination, so they could decontaminate it from anything that could be on it. As we evacuated Washington, D.C., I think it was probably our third night in the hotel. We'd been staying in a hotel for months at that point. ServPro apparently had been gotten to. They called me and they said, Mr. Shipp, if you don't pay, I think it was $15,000 to save your wife's heirlooms, we're going to put them out on the curb and throw them out. Shocked, I said, well, you can't do that while we're doing it. So I took the credit card. At that point, I didn't know whether it was my personal or government, but even if it was the government card, that's fine. Because it was for my evacuation, and this, without a doubt, was an evacuation expense. So either way, I went back and tried to go through my memory, and we were under such stretch I can't remember. But even let's say I did know it was a government credit card. That's fine because it was part of our evacuation expense. They were responsible. They caused ServPro to do this. So once I charged it on the credit card to save my wife's heirlooms, I went out and took out a loan and paid that credit card completely off, even though none of that was my doing. So what do you think they tried to use against me? My record was spotless. I was a top performer. What would they go after? The use of that credit card, which they tried to do, and of course I shot that down. I even got the credit union manager on tape saying it looked like this was retribution. Which of course it was. He didn't know that the CIA was trying to silence me at the time. I taped his conversation, still have it. Later on, I never heard from him again. So that's what they'll do. They'll look through your travel accounting, they'll look through your government credit card use, anything that they can find to try to destroy you and shut you up, they will do it. They'll try to deceive the employee. Well, we know you're under a lot of stress, and we want to help you with that. So we want you to report to the Office of Medical Services and see if maybe there's a psychiatrist there that can help you out to deal with your stress. So if you're not smart enough to realize what they're doing, you go down, you sit through an interview with a CIA psychiatrist, and none of which are honest. You go all the way back to MK Ultra and some of the things CIA psychiatrists have done. And now their job is just to protect the CIA. That's ching ching. That's where they get their money from, their paycheck. So the employee goes down there and they're like, yeah, I'm under a lot of stress because of this. You know, we're financially in trouble. We may lose our house. And so after the interview, what the psychiatrist will do, will put in the report, well, this person is overly stressed out. Actually, we think they're disgruntled, they're paranoid, and they need further counseling. And they'll put that in the person's file, building false evidence against them. If they ever do come out in public, then they have that file to pull out and use against them. In my case, I was, after my attorneys and I confronted the OGC, I came back to my office to find CIA managers waiting for me. I walked in there and they said, we ordered you to sign these documents. One document was their usual, I have engaged in insubordination against my manager. And I said, well, respectfully, I'm not going to sign that on the advice of counsel. Then they pulled out another one and said, I will report to the Office of Medical Services for blood and psychological counseling. I said, well, nice try. I respectfully declined that on the advice of counsel. And I said, you know darn well that the evidence in my case against you involves doctor's diagnosis and the psychiatrist's diagnosis of my wife and son, especially with clinical PTSD. So the blood test revealing the toxic exposure that these doctors had published, all of that was in the case against the CIA. And they actually thought they were going to get me to go down there and report for their own testing. How do you think that would work out? So this is what they do. This is part of the procedure, 60 plus years old. They'll accuse the employee, they tried to do this with my attorney, of trumped up security violations. Well, you said something that was classified, or you wrote something that was classified, or your attorneys sent a letter that was actually classified, and they'll try to get the person with that. And then if that doesn't work, what they'll do, if they have to, is they'll brand the employee as a security threat because they're disgruntled. Now, this didn't happen to me, but it happens to a lot of people, a lot of whistleblowers. They're a security threat. And the reason for that is once they brand them as a security threat, now they can do that, use it as a guise for surveillance of that person and for harassment. It's a refined system of entrapment. And they use it, the same procedure, again and again and again. It gets worse. So if the employee continues on, and I'm telling you at this point, everyone, you got to have faith to continue against this kind of onslaught. And one of the things that the CIA could never figure out in me is why I continue to stand against this, even with the threat of prison. Well, the why is I'm a person of faith. I happen to believe that I report to a higher authority, and I believe in his protection of me and my family. You can see it on one of the pages on fortheloveoffreedom.net, a dramatic result of personal prayer that happened, resulting in the resignation of George Tenet, who was the defendant in my case from the CIA in shame. So the CIA could not figure out why I kept going, because they don't understand faith. They don't understand that sort of thing. As a matter of fact, obviously they discourage it, and they banned manger scenes and anything to do with Christmas or Christianity from CIA office spaces, which of course is a violation of the Constitution. So they target the employee financially. They will, of course, rack up huge attorney's fees. They will try to get the employee, they'll try to take their job from them any way they can using false trumped up charges, because if they do that, the family loses all of their income, their health insurance, can't pay for their cars or anything else. That's happened to a lot of people, and many of them stopped right there because they were devastated. In one case, a person went out and committed suicide. So they drive the employee and their family into financial ruin. The shadow government, that the CIA will not stop at attacking the employee's family, their wife and children. What's the oldest method of the mafia and criminal enterprises in the past? If you threaten the man, if he's got a spine and guts, he'll say, do what you want to do. I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to say anything. So what do they do next? Well, I'll tell you what, if you don't talk, we know you live on such and such a street. You have a wife and 3 kids. We have somebody waiting in a car outside. And he you don't cooperate, then it's going to be the end of them. So they'll go to your family. They went after my family. The most precious thing in the world to me was my kids. I had a serious mental disorder when I was younger. Really, it was a medical miracle. I was given 6 weeks to live, but the doctor said that I would never have children. Sorry, folks. I turned that booger down. Stand by. Sometimes I really don't like this thing. All right. Hold on, everyone. Sorry about that. I'm turning it off. All right. So they will go after the person's family just like that in a mafia-like fashion. This is all RICO-like activity, just like organized crime does. And in my opinion, this is a version of organized crime. So the employee is broken and retreat. And this is the end of most cases. They're totally destroyed, devastated. They're facing serious emotional or mental stress and problems. PTSD is common, and they can't take it anymore, nor do they have the money to take it anymore, and they'll just disappear. And of course, their case never sees the light of day. As I mentioned, in some cases, the anguish is so great that the employee committed suicide, and that is the ultimate end of their strategy. The threat is gone, the person is gone, the whole thing disappears, and that's exactly what they want. Totally destroy the person, break them up mentally, emotionally, and financially, as well as their family. And that is complete destruction. Remember Gary Webb, the perfect crime. Gary Webb allegedly committed suicide with 2 shots to the head. How he got off 2 shots, I don't know. But anyway, Gary Webb was found dead in his hotel room with what was claimed by the detectives to be self-inflicted gunshot wounds. The ultimate crime. The CIA no longer had a problem with Gary Webb. Gary Webb was eliminated. Now, I mentioned the state secrets privilege. I don't want to get into too much detail, but people need to understand what the state secrets privilege is. It was actually derived from the doctrine of the King of England, where the King of England could stop any case against him if he didn't like it by invoking the privilege of the monarchy. Shut the case down, make it and the person go away. That is literally where the state secrets doctrine in the United States came from. Now, I thought our country was supposed to be fleeing from that kind of tyranny. No, it's not. Not at all. Not this government. An Air Force B-29 bomber crashed in Waycross, Georgia. It's in my book. I've been to the site. I've interviewed one of the daughters of the men who were killed. You can go to Waycross, and I'd recommend you do, and find the sign that was placed there where this plane went down. The B-29 Superfortress bomber, a huge plane, went into a nosedive and crashed nose first into a farm there and killed 3 of the RCA engineers. And it is, based on what I've read, that B-29 was involved in developing a drone program way back there. I think it was 1947. So the widows of the 3 RCA engineers asked the quote-unquote Air Force, and we know who else was involved, to tell them how their husbands died, how the crash happened. But the Air Force responded with the same old, well, we can't show you that because details of the crash are classified. They refused to let the widows see what happened to the plane. So the widows filed suit for the crash report. Okay, pretty good, no problem there. Well, the government actually created, in this case, the state's secrets privilege and sealed all the evidence, including the crash report, claiming it was a government secret. This was the creation of the state secrets privilege, and it's been in place ever since. However, Judith Paella-Lothar, the daughter of one of these men that were killed, did some searching on her own and found the crash report on the internet unclassified, which revealed gross negligence on the part of the pilots. Some of them had never flown that particular type of plane before. They overcompensated when one of the engines failed and drove the thing right into the ground. It was pilot negligence and pilot error. The report was unclassified on the internet, and Judy found it. So the executive and the judiciary branch now have made the state secrets privilege law, where they can shut down any case against the whistleblower with complete impunity, just like the monarchy of the King of England. Unbelievable. So the most tyrannical power of the U.S. government is based on a lie. the crash was negligence. It was not classified. The reasons for the crash were not classified. And now it's used routinely to seal legal cases, not just by the CIA, but by the NSA and the FBI. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here is the actual crash report. You can go out on the internet and find this. It's unclassified. There's nothing classified in here. What it does show is gross negligence on the part of the pilots that killed these ladies' husbands and these children's fathers. This is Judy Lothar, Judy Palya Lothar is how you pronounce it, with her mother, Mrs. Lothar, whose husband was killed, and that's Judy when she was a baby. I had a moving interview with Judy, who had realized that her government was not for her at all. It was against her. So, removing the veil, as we're getting close to wrapping this up. So what did they do to me? When I published from the Company of Shadows in 2012, and I mentioned I placed in the book the diagnosis of my family, the identities of my family members, what the doctor's report said, and I've already covered that. The CIA blacked that out in my book. Wouldn't even let me mention the name of my wife and children. They called them, well, the legal case, they called them the Does. It was ridiculous. Barbie Doe, Johnny Doe, and gave my kids Doe names. So in the book, they wouldn't even let me mention the identities of my family and my kids and wife who had been made seriously ill by whatever was in that house. So in the book, I published a picture, as I talked about, and here's what it looks like. Blackout identities and case facts are hidden in secret. There's nothing classified there. There's nothing that even talks about the CIA case there, my case against the CIA, nothing. But they blacked it out because they didn't want the identities of my wife and children known. So what I did was I included a picture of a shadow. And this is the shadow of my oldest son, who was made desperately ill due to toxic exposure. And they concealed his identity in my book from the public and even from our congressman. That is literally his shadow there. So what I did, and of course I was ready and willing, as I mentioned, to go to prison if I had to. They messed with the greatest love of my life, and that was my children. So I built a code into the book, and the CIA censors missed it. And what the code does is it reveals the identities of who the CIA injured, and it reveals what they blacked out that was unclassified. Doctor's diagnosis, et cetera, I've talked about. And I put this in from the Company of Shadows. The code is in there. It is now on fortheloveoffreedom.net, my website, for all to see. All right. So, everyone, we have to remember this. This is a quote that I quote quite a bit of the time after my speeches because it's so important. When people fear their government, there's tyranny. When the government fears the people, there's liberty. It's a quote from Thomas Jefferson. So we're wrapping it up here. I hope whistleblowers out there that you see this. I hope the public sees this. Send this around for everybody to see so they can see this procedure that the shadow government, deep state, uses to destroy whistleblowers, and they'll know how dangerous and deadly it is for a whistleblower to come out. And people will start supporting, and attorneys will start supporting pro se, hopefully, whistleblowers so that they can be protected from destruction. To find out more, you can go to fortheloveoffreedom.net. I've published all these documents. I've published all my credentials, not to look like a tough guy, but so if anybody comes out and says that, oh, Mr. Ship's just a fake, or he's never worked for the CIA, all of my diplomas, credentials are there for you to see. And I did that for that very reason. So if the CIA or anyone else came out and said he never worked here or he never did that, the evidence is there, as well as all the documents that CIA tried to conceal regarding the poisoning of my family. Once a week, Thursday nights at 7, I do a program on patreon.com/Kevin_Ship. And we get into issues like these in great detail every Thursday night at 7. I give constant updates on shadow government, deep state activity on my Twitter account, Twitter at Kevin_Ship. And I'm on Facebook also, Facebook Kevin Ship. You can reach me via Gmail if you have any questions. My Gmail is forloveoffreedom. Remember, it's not for the love of freedom. It's forloveoffreedom@gmail.com. And you can also find that on my website. So thank you very much, everyone. I hope that this benefits people out there who may be going through this. I hope that the public becomes aware of this process because it is so horrific, it is so illegal, and certainly it's unconstitutional. Sadly, we're living under a post-constitutional government now, and the Patriot movement and the Red Pill movement coming together are starting to become a strong voice to change that and bring this country back under the Constitution, expose and reform the shadow government and the deep state because we want our country back. Thank you so much, everyone, and I hope you join me next time.